The restaurant hummed with the familiar evening rush, a symphony of clinking silverware and muted conversations that Chen had learned to read through vibration alone. She moved between tables at Marcello's with practiced efficiency, balancing plates with the kind of grace that came from 3 years of doing the same dance every night. The smell of garlic and fresh basil hung thick in the air, and the warm amber lighting cast everything in a soft glow that made the worn carpet and chipped paint on the windowsills look almost romantic. Lily had stopped noticing those flaws years ago, the same way she'd stopped noticing the pitying look some customers gave her when they realized she couldn't hear them, when they had to point at the menu or write their orders down on the notepad she always kept ready. She was good at her job despite what some people assumed, maybe even because of what they assumed. She watched faces with an intensity hearing people never developed, caught every micro-expression, every shift in posture that signaled impatience or satisfaction, or the need for a water refill. She read lips well enough to catch most conversations, though she pretended not to, letting people have their privacy even when their mouths formed words she could easily decipher. The other servers had learned to tap her shoulder gently before speaking, to face her directly, to enunciate without exaggerating. Most of the regular customers had learned too, and the ones who hadn't usually didn't come back after their first awkward encounter. It was a Thursday night, which meant moderately busy, but not overwhelming. Lily had 6 tables in her section, all full, all at different stages of their meals. She'd just delivered appetizers to table 12 when the front door opened and the air in the restaurant changed. She felt it before she saw it, the way everyone's attention shifted like iron filings toward a magnet. She turned, her tray balanced against her hip, and saw them. There were 4 men, but only one mattered. He walked in first, and the space seemed to rearrange itself around him. Tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Lily made in 6 months, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, fitted perfectly to broad shoulders and a lean waist. But it wasn't the expensive clothes or the classical features that made her breath catch. It was the way he moved, with absolute confidence and control, like a predator who'd never known fear because nothing had ever been stronger than him. The 3 men with him were clearly security. They had that look, that vigilant stillness, eyes constantly scanning even as they followed their boss to the table the hostess was already rushing to prepare. The best table, by the window, but set back enough for privacy. Carlo, the owner, had materialized from the kitchen, all nervous smiles and obsequious gestures. Lily had worked here long enough to recognize when Carlo was afraid, and he was afraid now, trying desperately to hide it under enthusiasm. The man in the expensive suit said something to Carlo, who nodded vigorously and gestured to the table. The 4 men sat, the boss taking the seat that faced the door, his back to the wall. Military training, Lily thought, or something darker. The 3 security men positioned themselves with clear sightlines to all entrances. Whatever these men were, they were dangerous. Carlo caught Lily's eye and beckoned her over with urgent hand movements. She felt her stomach drop. Of course he'd give her this table. Not because she was the best server, though she was, but because if something went wrong, Carlo could claim he'd done his best, had given them excellent service, and whatever happened wasn't his fault. Lily had learned to recognize when she was being used as a shield, and she'd learned to accept it because jobs weren't easy to find when you couldn't hear the phone ring or respond to verbal instructions. She approached the table with her notepad ready, her practiced smile in place. The 3 security men barely glanced at her, but the boss looked up, and Lily felt pinned by his gaze. His eyes were dark, almost black in the amber lighting, and they were assessing her with an intelligence that made her feel transparent. She saw the moment he noticed the small hearing aid in her left ear, barely visible beneath her hair, but there if you were looking. She saw something flicker across his face, too quick to identify, before his expression smoothed into polite interest. Lily pulled out her notepad, pointed to it, then to herself, and gave a small shrug that she hoped communicated the situation without making it awkward. She was used to this moment, the brief explanation followed by either understanding or annoyance. She'd developed a thick skin about both reactions. But then the man did something completely unexpected. His hands moved, fluid and precise, forming shapes that Lily recognized with a shock that went through her like electricity. "Good evening," he signed. "It's nice to meet you." Lily stared at him, her notepad forgotten. No one signed to her, not customers, not strangers, barely even her own family, who'd never quite gotten past basic phrases. She'd been functionally alone in her silence for so long that seeing her language come from this dangerous, beautiful man felt like a hallucination. "You sign," she signed back, knowing her face was showing too much surprise, too much emotion, unable to help it. "I do," he signed and smiled. It transformed his face completely, made him look younger, more human, less like a walking threat. "I had a teacher once, a good friend. He was deaf. He taught me that language isn't just about sound." One of the security men leaned over and whispered something to the boss, but he waved him off without looking away from Lily. "What's your name?" he signed. "Lily." She signed and felt strange using her hands instead of her notepad. It felt intimate somehow, like they were speaking in code, sharing something private even in the middle of the crowded restaurant. "Lily," he repeated, and she watched his lips form her name, watched his hands spell it out. "Beautiful. I'm Dante." Of course he was. Dante. The name fit him, classical and strong and slightly dangerous. Lily became aware that they were staring at each other, that the other three men at the table were watching with expressions ranging from confusion to surprise, that several other diners were glancing over curiously. She forced herself to look down at her notepad, to remember she was working, that this was a customer, no matter how unexpected their conversation had been. "What can I get you?" she signed, then pointed to the menus on the table. Dante consulted briefly with his companions, then signed his order. It was extensive, expensive, and specific. Lily wrote it all down, grateful for something normal to focus on, for the familiar routine of taking orders and promising to return with drinks. But when she turned to go, Dante's hand moved in her peripheral vision, catching her attention. "Wait," he signed. "Do you like working here?" It was such an odd question that Lily didn't know how to respond. She looked at Carlo, who was watching from behind the bar with obvious anxiety, then back at Dante. "It's a job," she signed honestly. "I'm good at it." "You are," Dante agreed. "I've been watching. You see everything." His hands moved with confidence, with the kind of fluency that suggested years of practice, not just casual knowledge. "But that's not what I asked." Lily considered lying, giving the expected answer. But something about the way he looked at her, the way he'd bothered to learn her language when most people didn't, made her answer truthfully. "No," she signed. "I don't like it, but I need it." Dante nodded, and something in his expression suggested he understood more than she'd said. "Thank you for being honest," he signed. Then, releasing her from whatever strange spell had fallen over them, he gestured toward the kitchen. Lily fled, feeling like she'd just survived something intense without knowing exactly what. In the kitchen, she clipped the order to the wheel and took a moment to breathe, to remind herself that this was just a customer, just a table, just another night at Marcello's. "Who is that?" Maria, the other evening server, whispered urgently. She was staring through the kitchen window at Dante's table. "Carlo is terrified. I've never seen him like this." "I don't know," Lily said, but she was lying. She had a pretty good idea. You didn't move through the world like Dante did, with that kind of power, and that kind of security, unless you were someone important, someone dangerous, someone connected to the kinds of businesses that ran under the surface of the city like dark water. She delivered drinks, breadsticks, appetizers, Each time she approached the table, Dante signed a greeting, asked her a question, treated her like a person instead of a convenience. The security men had stopped looking surprised and now just seemed resigned to their boss having a conversation with the deaf waitress in sign language. One of them, the youngest one with a scar across his cheek, even attempted a clumsy thank you sign when Lily brought his water. She corrected his hand position gently, and he grinned like she'd given him a gift. The main courses came out perfect, steaming plates of pasta and veal and risotto that smelled so good. Lily's stomach reminded her she'd been too nervous to eat during her break. She delivered everything with practiced efficiency, checking that everyone had what they needed, that nothing was wrong. Dante signed his approval of the food, told her to thank the chef, asked if she'd tried the carbonara because it was exceptional. "I can't afford to eat here," Lily signed without thinking, then immediately regretted the admission. It was unprofessional, too personal, the kind of thing that could get her in trouble if someone complained. But Dante just looked at her with something that might have been sympathy, or might have been understanding. "That should change," he signed. Then, before she could figure out what that meant, he gestured that they were fine and didn't need anything else for now. The evening progressed. Lily's other tables turned over, new customers arriving, old ones leaving. But Dante's table remained, the four men talking quietly among themselves. She couldn't read their lips from this distance, couldn't tell what they were discussing, but she caught occasional gestures that suggested business, negotiations, the kind of serious conversation that happened over expensive meals in dimly lit restaurants. At one point, an older man approached the table. Lily was delivering desserts to table 9 when she saw him, portly and nervous, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief, despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. He spoke to Dante, who listened without expression. Then Dante said something short, and the man's face went pale. He nodded rapidly, backed away, and left the restaurant walking quickly. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. She'd just witnessed something significant, some kind of power play or threat or negotiation, and she was grateful she hadn't heard it, hadn't understood it, could maintain plausible deniability. Finally, after nearly 3 hours, Dante signaled for the check. Lily brought it over in the leather folder, set it discreetly by his elbow. He glanced at the total without reaction, the kind of person for whom money was clearly not a concern, and pulled out a black credit card that caught the light like oil. But before she could take it, he signed to her again. "Do you have a moment? I'd like to ask you something." Lily glanced around the restaurant. It was late now, past 10, and her section had cleared out except for one lingering table nursing coffee. Carlo was in the back office doing paperwork. Maria was rolling silverware. There was no reason to say no except the warning bells going off in her head, the ones that said this man was dangerous, that getting involved with someone like him was asking for trouble. She nodded. Dante pulled out his phone, typed something, then showed her the screen. It was a job listing. Executive assistant position at Russo Enterprises, starting salary 3 times what she made at Marcello's. Benefits included. Bilingual preferred. ASL counted as bilingual. "This is my company," he signed after she'd read it. "I have an opening. You're observant, intelligent, professional, and you communicate in ways most people never learn to. I think you'd be excellent at the job." Lily stared at the phone, then at him. "You don't know anything about me," she signed. "I'm a waitress. I have a high school diploma and 3 years of restaurant experience. That's not executive assistant material." "You're wrong," Dante signed. "I've spent 3 hours watching you work. You manage 6 tables simultaneously, remember complex orders without writing everything down, read customer needs before they voice them, handle problems smoothly, and maintain composure under pressure. Those are exactly the skills I need." "Why?" Lily signed, and she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. "Why me? Why now? You don't offer jobs to waitresses who take your order." Dante was quiet for a moment, his hands still. Then he signed slowly, carefully, like he wanted her to understand every nuance. "Because I built an empire by recognizing talent when I see it, Because I know what it's like to be underestimated because of things you can't control, and because when I signed to you tonight, you looked at me like I was a person instead of a title or a threat. That's rare. That's valuable. Lily wanted to say yes, wanted it with an intensity that scared her. 3 times her current salary would mean she could move out of the basement apartment she shared with 2 roommates. Could mean health insurance, the kind that might cover better hearing aids or even the cochlear implant surgery her doctors had mentioned. Could mean a future that looked like something other than endless shifts at restaurants like this one, coming home smelling like grease and garlic, falling into bed exhausted only to do it again the next day. But she'd learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. "What do you really do?" she signed. "What business are you in?" Dante smiled, and it was a darker smile this time, acknowledging something unspoken. Import and export, real estate development, investment consulting, and other things that operate in gray areas of the law. I won't lie to you, Lily. My business isn't entirely legitimate, but the assistant position is. You'd be handling my schedule, coordinating meetings, managing communications. Nothing illegal, nothing that would put you at risk. People in restaurants don't get terrified of legitimate businessmen, Lily signed. No, Dante agreed. They don't. I have a reputation. Some of it's deserved, some of it's useful fiction. But I'm offering you a real job with real pay doing real work. What I do on the other side of my business doesn't have to involve you. One of the security men leaned over and murmured something to Dante, tapping his watch. Dante nodded, then signed to Lily again. Think about it, please. Here. He pulled out a business card, crisp and elegant, with just his name, a phone number, and an email address. He added something handwritten on the back in surprisingly neat script, then slid it across the table to her. Lily picked up the card, turned it over. On the back, he'd written, "You deserve better than this. Call me if you're ready for it." She looked up at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd spoken her language and offered her an escape route from a life that was slowly crushing her. "I'll think about it," she signed. "That's all I ask," Dante signed back. Then he stood, the other 3 men rising with him, and pulled out his wallet. He placed several bills on the table, far too much even for a meal that expensive, a tip that was more than she made in a week. "Thank you, Lily," he signed, "for your excellent service, and for the conversation." Then they were gone, sweeping out of the restaurant like a departing storm, and Lily was left standing by the empty table with a business card in her hand and her mind spinning with possibilities and warnings in equal measure. Carlo emerged from the back office looking relieved. "They're gone? Everything was okay? No problems?" "No problems," Lily said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears, the way it always did, unable to modulate properly when she couldn't hear herself. "They were happy with everything." "Good, good." Carlo saw the money on the table and his eyes widened. "Madonna, that's more than the bill." He looked at Lily with new appraisal, like maybe her disability had been useful for once. "You keep that tip. You earned it." Lily pocketed the money mechanically, cleared the table, wiped it down. But her mind wasn't on the work. It was on the card in her apron pocket, on the job offer, on the way Dante's hands had moved forming words in her language, on the possibility that her life might be about to change in ways she couldn't predict or control. That night, after her shift ended at midnight, Lily walked home through streets that felt different somehow, charged with potential. She lived in a converted basement in a neighborhood that was gentrifying, which meant it was still rough, but getting expensive. Her roommates, 2 other women who worked service jobs, were already asleep when she got in. Lily made herself tea she couldn't hear boiling, sat on her narrow bed, and stared at Dante's business card. She knew she should be smart about this, should recognize it for what it probably was. A powerful man intrigued by a novelty, offering an opportunity that would come with strings attached, expectations she couldn't meet or wouldn't want to. She'd seen this story before, lived versions of it herself. Men who were fascinated by her deafness, who wanted to save her or fix her, or treat her like an exotic puzzle to solve, It never ended well, but Dante hadn't treated her like she was broken, hadn't raised his voice, or exaggerated his signing, or acted like she was slow because she couldn't hear. He'd communicated with her as an equal, had seen her skills instead of her limitations, had made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember. Lily pulled out her laptop, the old one that barely worked, and searched for Russo Enterprises. What she found made her breath catch. It was a real company, headquartered downtown in one of the gleaming new towers that had gone up in the last 5 years. The website listed legitimate businesses: import, export, shipping logistics, real estate holdings, investment portfolios. But when she dug deeper, reading articles and forum posts and the kinds of rumors that lived on the internet, she found the other side: allegations of money laundering, suspected ties to organized crime, whispers about Dante Russo being the youngest head of one of the 5 families that controlled the city's underworld. Nothing proven, nothing that had stuck in court, but enough smoke to suggest fire. Lily closed her laptop and lay back on her bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Her whole life, people had made decisions for her. Her parents, well-meaning but overwhelmed, had stuck her in special education even though she was smart, had lowered their expectations because they couldn't imagine what a deaf daughter might achieve. Teachers had passed her along without pushing her, satisfied if she just kept up rather than excelled. Employers had given her kitchen work, server work, anything where her disability would be less of an issue. Everyone had been so busy protecting her from the world that they'd never asked if maybe she wanted to face it head-on instead. Now here was a man offering her something more. Something dangerous, probably. Something complicated, certainly, but something that saw her as capable, as valuable, as more than just her inability to hear. She picked up her phone, pulled up the email address from his card, and started typing before she could talk herself out of it. Mr. Russo, I'm interested in discussing the position. When would be a good time for an interview? Lily Chen. She hit send before she could reconsider, then turned off her phone and tried to sleep, knowing she wouldn't, knowing she'd just made a decision that would change everything. The response came by morning. Not from Dante, but from someone named Teresa, who signed herself as head of personnel. Professional, polite, inviting Lily to come too. The Russo Enterprises offices Monday at 10 a.m. for a formal interview. The email included the address, parking information, and an attachment with details about the position. Lily called in sick to Marcello's for Monday, enduring Carlo's suspicious questions and thinly veiled threats about reliability. She spent her meager savings on a new interview outfit, nothing fancy but professional, the kind of thing she'd never needed before. She practiced what she'd say, how she'd explain her qualifications, but mostly she tried to calm the anxiety that churned in her stomach. The Russo building was exactly as intimidating as she'd expected, all glass and steel and modern art in the lobby. The security guard checked her ID, made a call, then directed her to the elevator. 30th floor, executive offices. Lily's ears popped on the way up, the change in pressure making her feel unbalanced in more ways than one. The receptionist was a young man with warm eyes, who immediately started signing when he saw Lily. "Good morning. You must be Ms. Chen. Mr. Russo is expecting you. Can I get you water, coffee, anything?" Lily declined, too nervous to trust herself with a beverage. The reception area was gorgeous, all clean lines and expensive furniture, and windows that overlooked the entire city. She could see Marcello's from here, or at least the neighborhood it was in, tiny and insignificant from this height. "Lily!" She turned to find Dante emerging from an office, and he was somehow more striking in daylight, in his element, than he'd been in the restaurant. He wore a different suit, navy this time, and his hair was slightly less perfect, like he'd been running his hands through it. When he saw her, he smiled, that transformative smile that made him look almost boyish. "Thank you for coming," he signed. "Please, come in." His office was massive, taking up a corner of the building with windows on 2 sides. There was a desk that probably cost more than Lily's car, leather chairs, actual artwork on the walls. But there was also a comfortable seating area with a couch and chairs arranged around a coffee table, and that's where Dante led her. "Water?" he asked, signing and speaking simultaneously, and Lily realized he did that for her benefit, giving her both options to understand him. "Yes, please," she signed back, then added vocally, "Thank you," hating how her voice sounded, but knowing it was expected in professional settings. Dante poured water from a pitcher into 2 glasses, handed her one, and sat across from her. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Lily felt that same electric awareness she'd felt in the restaurant, like the air between them was charged with something she didn't have a name for. "I'm going to be honest with you," Dante signed, setting his water down. "The assistant position is real, and I do need someone, but that's not the only reason I asked you here." Lily's stomach dropped. Here it was. The catch. "Then why?" she signed. "Because when I saw you working, saw how you handled everything and everyone with such grace despite the challenges you face, I was impressed. And then when I signed to you and you looked at me like I'd given you something precious, I was intrigued." He paused, his hands still for a moment. "I want to offer you the job, but I also want to be honest that I'm attracted to you. I'm interested in you, and I'm not good at separating business from personal when it comes to things I want." Lily felt her face flush. No one had ever been this direct with her. Most people danced around attraction, especially with her. Like her deafness made her too fragile for honesty. "That's not appropriate for a job interview," she signed, but her hands were shaking. "No, it's not," Dante agreed, "which is why I'm telling you now, before you take the job, so you can make an informed decision. If you work for me, I'll keep things professional. You'll do your job, I'll be your boss, that's all. But I wanted you to know where I stand. I don't believe in hiding the truth." "Why me?" Lily signed again, needing to understand. "You could have anyone. You're powerful, wealthy. Clearly you have options. Why the deaf waitress?" Dante leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because you see things other people miss. Because you've survived in a world that wasn't built for you, and you've done it with dignity. Because when I sign to you, I don't have to explain myself or apologize for who I am. And because you stood in that restaurant and were honest with me even though you didn't know if I'd use it against you. That kind of courage is rare." Lily felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in this office, in front of this man who was offering her everything she'd wanted and terrifying her with how much she wanted to take it. "I researched you," she signed. "I know what people say about you, about your business." "And," Dante signed, his expression neutral. "And I'm not naive enough to think I can work for you and not be touched by whatever you're involved in. If I take this job, I'm making a choice to enter your world. I understand that." "Good," Dante signed. "I'd rather have you informed than protected. Protected people make mistakes because they don't see the danger. Informed people make choices." "I want the job," Lily signed, and as she did, she felt something shift inside her, a door opening onto a future she couldn't quite see. "But I need to know something first. If I can't do it, if I'm not good at it, will you fire me? Or will you keep me because you're interested in me?" Dante smiled, and it was appreciative. "I'd fire you. I didn't build this company by letting sentiment interfere with competence. But I don't think I'll have to. I think you're going to be excellent." "Okay," Lily signed. "Then I accept." They spent the next hour going over details: salary, benefits, schedule, expectations. Teresa joined them, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, who signed competently and ran through HR paperwork with efficient professionalism. Lily would start in 2 weeks, giving her time to quit Marcello's properly. She'd have her own office, her own computer, her own set of responsibilities that made her head spin with their complexity and importance. As she was leaving, Dante walked her to the elevator. "Lily!" he signed, and she turned back. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "Thank you for seeing me," she signed back. Then, impulsively, she added, "For really seeing me." His eyes darkened, and for a moment, Lily thought he might say something more, might cross the professional line he'd just promised to maintain. But he just nodded, and the elevator doors closed between them, and Lily rode down to the ground floor feeling like she'd just jumped off a cliff and didn't know yet if she'd fly or fall. Quitting Marcello's was easier than she'd expected. Carlo tried to guilt her into staying, offering a small raise she knew he couldn't afford, but ultimately let her go with bad grace. Maria hugged her, made her promise to keep in touch, told her she deserved something better than this place. The other staff signed a card and gave her a small bouquet of supermarket flowers that made her cry in the bathroom on her last shift. The 2 weeks before starting at Russo Enterprises passed in a blur of preparation. Lily bought professional clothes, practiced her signing to make sure it was sharp and professional, read everything she could find about executive assistants and business management. She told her roommates about the new job, but not about Dante, not about the complications she was walking into. They were happy for her, excited about the salary increase that meant she'd be able to afford her own place soon. Her first day arrived with gray skies and rain, the kind of weather that made the city look bleak. Lily dressed carefully, arrived early, and was greeted by Teresa, who walked her through security protocols, introduced her to key staff, and showed her to her office. It was small but real, with a window that looked out on the city and a desk that was actually hers. There was a computer already set up, dual monitors, a phone system that Teresa showed her how to use with video relay services for calls, adaptations that had clearly been researched and implemented specifically for her needs. Mr. Russo wanted to make sure you had everything you needed, Teresa explained. If there's anything else that would help you do your job better, you tell me immediately. Dante himself was in meetings most of that first day, but he stopped by her office in the late afternoon. "How's it going?" he signed. "Overwhelming, but good," Lily signed honestly. She'd spent the day learning systems, reading files, trying to understand the scope of what Russo Enterprises actually did. It was vast, complicated, interconnected in ways that made her head spin. "It gets easier," Dante promised. "Give yourself time." He paused at the door, looked back at her. "I'm glad you're here, Lily." Then he was gone, and Lily was left with the strange feeling that she'd just been pulled deeper into something she didn't fully understand but couldn't seem to resist. The first month was brutal. Lily worked 12-hour days trying to keep up, learning the rhythms of Dante's schedule, the expectations of the various departments, the unspoken rules of an organization that operated half in legitimate business and half in shadow. She coordinated meetings, managed communications, kept track of 1,000 moving pieces. She made mistakes, caught most of them, and learned to anticipate problems before they became crises. Dante was professional, patient, encouraging. He praised her when she did well and corrected her mistakes without making her feel stupid. He signed to her constantly, their conversations a mix of business and occasional personal asides. She learned that he drank his coffee black, that he hated mornings but was always in the office by 7, that he had a scar on his left hand from a knife fight when he was 17, that his sister called him every day at noon without fail. She learned other things too, darker things. She saw people come to his office looking confident and leave looking scared. She overheard conversations she wasn't supposed to hear, understood through lip reading what was meant to be private. She saw money change hands in ways that weren't recorded in any ledger. She began to understand that Russo Enterprises was exactly what the rumors said. A front for something larger and more dangerous, and Dante was at the center of it all. It should have scared her, should have sent her running. But instead, she found herself fascinated, drawn in deeper, wanting to understand this man who could be gentle with her one moment and ruthless with someone else the next. 2 months into her job, everything changed. Lily was working late, finishing a report that needed to be done before a morning meeting. The office was mostly empty, just a few security guards and the cleaning crew making their rounds. She was so focused on her computer that she didn't notice someone approaching until a hand slammed down on her desk. She jumped, looked up, and found a man standing over her. He was huge, easily 6.5 feet, with a face that looked like it had been in too many fights. He was saying something, his mouth moving angrily, but Lily couldn't read his lips from this angle, couldn't understand what he wanted. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice too loud as always. "I'm deaf. I can't understand you. Please write it down, or—" He grabbed her arm, yanked her out of her chair hard enough that she stumbled. Pain shot through her shoulder, and real fear flooded through her. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was violence. She tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. He was shouting now. She could see his face reddening, could see spittle flying from his mouth. Then suddenly, he wasn't holding her anymore. He was flying backward, hitting the wall hard enough to crack the drywall. Dante stood where the man had been, his face absolutely cold, fury radiating from him in waves. He signed quickly to Lily. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, too shocked to respond properly. Her arm throbbed where the man had grabbed her, but nothing was broken. Dante turned back to the man, who was struggling to his feet, and said something that Lily couldn't hear but could see from his body language was a threat. 2 security guards appeared, must have been summoned somehow, and hauled the man away. He was still shouting, still struggling, but he was outmatched and outmaneuvered. Dante came back to Lily, his hands gentle as he examined her arm, his face transitioning from fury to concern. "Did he hurt you?" he signed. "I'm okay," Lily signed back, but she was shaking now, adrenaline flooding her system. "Who was that?" "Someone who made a mistake," Dante signed grimly. "Someone who touched something that's mine." The possessiveness in that statement should have bothered her, should have sent up red flags, but instead, it made her feel safe, protected, valued. "What did he want?" "Doesn't matter," Dante signed. "He's gone. He won't bother you again." He paused, his hands hovering in the air for a moment. "I should have warned you better. Should have made sure security was more visible. This is my fault." "It's not your fault someone attacked me," Lily signed, surprised to find herself defending him. "It is if they did it because you work for me," Dante signed. His jaw was tight, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. "This world I'm in, it touches everyone around me. I told you that before, but maybe I didn't make it clear enough how real that danger is." Lily looked at him, this powerful man who was blaming himself for something he hadn't done, and made a decision. "I'm not quitting," she signed firmly, "if that's what you're about to suggest." "Lily?" "No," she interrupted, her hands sharp and decisive. "I chose this. I chose to work for you, knowing who you are. One asshole with a grudge doesn't change that." Dante stared at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. The professional distance he'd maintained for 2 months cracked, and she saw underneath to something raw and hungry and honest. "You're extraordinary," he signed. "Do you know that?" "I'm stubborn," Lily signed back. "There's a difference." He laughed, a real laugh that seemed surprised out of him, and the tension broke. "Let me drive you home," he signed. "Please, I need to know you got there safely." Lily nodded, partly because she didn't trust her hands to be steady enough to drive, partly because she didn't want to be alone yet, and partly because she wanted more time with him, wanted to sit in the confined space of a car and let herself acknowledge what had been, building between them for months. The car was expensive and quiet, which meant Lily could almost forget she couldn't hear the engine. One of Dante's security men drove while Dante sat in the back with her, the privacy screen up between them and the driver. For a while, they didn't sign, just sat in comfortable silence. Then Dante's hands moved. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he signed. "Not since that first night at the restaurant. I promised I'd keep things professional, and I have. But it's been the hardest thing I've done in years." Lily's breath caught. She knew she should tell him to stop, should maintain the boundaries they'd established. But she was so tired of being alone, of being cautious, of denying herself things she wanted because they seemed too good, or too dangerous, or too complicated. "I think about you too," she signed back. "All the time." Dante reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough, and Lily leaned into the touch before she could stop herself. "This is a bad idea," he signed with his other hand. "Getting involved with me. You could do so much better." "That's my choice to make," Lily signed. She placed her hand over his, holding it against her cheek. "And I'm making it." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious. Lily had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this kind of focused intensity that made her feel like she was the only thing that mattered. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, and let herself fall into the feeling, into the want that had been building for months. They broke apart when the car pulled up to her building. Dante rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. "I want to do this right," he signed. "Take you on dates. Court you properly. Not just fall into bed because we want to." Lily smiled. "Okay," she signed. "Then take me on a date. Tomorrow night." "I'm supposed to have a business dinner," Dante signed, then grinned. "But I'm canceling it. Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 7. He walked her to her door, kissed her once more, soft and sweet, and left. Lily went inside, touched her lips where she could still feel the pressure of his mouth, and knew that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Whatever happened now, she was in this completely. The next 6 months passed in a blur of work and dates and slowly deepening connection. Dante took her to expensive restaurants where the staff treated them like royalty, to art galleries where he explained pieces with surprising knowledge, to his penthouse apartment where they talked until dawn about everything and nothing. He met her friends, charmed them effortlessly. She met more of his family, his sister Sophia, who was warm and welcoming, his niece, who was delighted to have someone else who signed. But there were also the other parts of his life, the ones he tried to keep separate but couldn't always. There were phone calls in the middle of the night that he took in another room, coming back tense and troubled. There were days when he was distant, preoccupied with problems he wouldn't explain. There were threats, both subtle and overt, reminders that the world Dante operated in was dangerous and unforgiving. One night, 5 months into their relationship, Lily was at Dante's place when a call came in at 3 a.m. She woke to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to her, his whole body tight with tension. She touched his shoulder, and he turned, his face stricken in a way she'd never seen before. "I have to go," he signed. "Something's happened. Something bad." "What?" Lily signed, fear flooding through her. "I can't explain, but I need you to stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Teresa. Promise me." Lily wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but she saw something like fear in his eyes, and it terrified her. "I promise." He kissed her hard, desperately, and then he was gone. Lily paced the apartment for hours, unable to sleep, unable to do anything but worry. She checked her phone obsessively, but there were no messages. She tried to distract herself with television, with reading, with anything, but her mind kept spiraling to worst-case scenarios. Dawn came with no news. Then, noon. Lily was seriously considering calling the police, calling Teresa, calling anyone, when the door opened and Dante came in. He looked exhausted, his shirt was torn, and there was blood on his jacket that she hoped wasn't his. "What happened?" Lily signed as soon as he was close enough. "There was a situation," Dante signed wearily. He sank onto the couch, and she sat beside him. "Someone made a move against my organization. We had to respond. It got violent." "Are you hurt?" "Not seriously, bruised, tired, but alive." "The blood?" "Not mine." Lily felt sick. She'd known intellectually what Dante's world involved, but seeing the evidence of it, the blood and exhaustion and danger, made it real in a way nothing else had. Did someone die? Dante looked at her for a long moment. Yes. He didn't elaborate, and Lily didn't ask. Some things she didn't want to know, couldn't bear to know, but she also didn't pull away. Instead, she took his hands in hers and signed, "Go clean up. I'll make coffee. Then you should sleep." Relief washed across his face, so profound that Lily realized he'd expected her to leave, to run, to finally hit the limit of what she could accept. But she couldn't leave him. Love didn't work that way, didn't give you an exit door just because things got hard or scary or complicated. "I love you," Dante signed. "I should have said it before. I love you, Lily." "I love you too," she signed back. "Even when you terrify me, even when I don't understand your world. I love you." They moved in together a month later, Lily giving up her shared basement apartment for Dante's penthouse, with its views and security and isolation from the normal world. Her roommates threw her a going-away party, told her how happy they were for her, never quite said that they thought she was making a mistake, even though she could see it in their eyes. Life settled into a new normal. Lily continued working as Dante's assistant, now understanding the full scope of what that meant, what she was helping facilitate. She managed his calendar, knowing that some appointments were covers for other meetings. She took calls knowing that some conversations were coded references to illegal activities. She'd crossed the line from innocent employee to willing participant, and she couldn't quite bring herself to care. Because she was happy. Happier than she'd ever been. Dante was attentive, loving, protective. He learned her rhythms, her needs, the ways her deafness shaped her experience of the world. He installed special alert systems in the apartment, so she'd know if someone was at the door or if there was an emergency. He learned to cook the food she loved, brought her coffee in bed every morning, held her through the nightmares that sometimes plagued her about the man who'd grabbed her in the office. They talked about the future, about maybe getting married someday, about whether they wanted kids. Dante was surprisingly traditional about some things, wanted to do everything properly, wanted to give Lily the life she deserved. She laughed and told him she deserved him, complicated and dangerous and wonderful as he was. 8 months into their relationship, on a Tuesday that seemed like any other Tuesday, everything changed again. Lily was at work, coordinating a meeting between Dante and some investors, when 3 men in suits walked into the office. She knew immediately they were law enforcement, could see it in their posture, their expressions, the way they moved with authority. They showed her badges, FBI. They were asking for Dante, but their eyes were on her, assessing, judging. One of them started asking questions, but Lily shook her head, pointed to her ear, pulled out her notepad. The agent frowned, then wrote, "Where is Dante Russo?" "In a meeting," Lily wrote back. "I can get him." "Don't bother," the agent wrote. "We have a warrant." He showed her a document, legal and official and terrifying. Lily's hands shook as she picked up her phone, sent a text to Dante. FBI in office. Warrant. Then she watched as the agents spread through the space, beginning their search. Other employees were gathering, confused and frightened. Security stood by, helpless, knowing they couldn't interfere. Dante emerged from his meeting, looking calm, controlled, but Lily saw the tension in his jaw. He spoke to the agents, who showed him the warrant, explained what they were looking for. Then he looked at Lily and signed, "Call Marcus, the lawyer. Tell him to get here now." The next hours were a nightmare. The FBI seized computers, files, records. They questioned employees. They spent an hour in Dante's office, going through everything. Lily sat at her desk, trying to look busy, trying not to cry, trying not to think about what this meant. Finally, they left, carrying boxes of evidence. Dante came to her office, closed the door, and signed, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry you had to see that." "What's going to happen?" Lily signed. "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe they don't have enough to make charges stick. Maybe this is just harassment." But he didn't look confident. and Lily felt fear settle into her stomach like ice. That night, alone in the apartment, because Dante had meetings with lawyers, Lily sat in the dark and thought about what she'd become. An accomplice, an accessory, someone who'd known what was happening and helped anyway. If Dante went down, she'd probably go with him. But even knowing that, even understanding the consequences, she couldn't bring herself to regret her choices. She'd been surviving her whole life, getting by, settling for less because she'd never believed she deserved more. Dante had shown her something different. He'd seen her as capable, as valuable, as worthy of love and respect and partnership. He'd given her a life that felt full and rich and exciting, even when it was terrifying. Her phone buzzed with a text. Dante, I love you. Whatever happens, remember that I love you. Lily wrote back, I love you too. Come home safe. She didn't know if he would. Didn't know if any of them would make it through whatever was coming. But she knew she wouldn't run, wouldn't hide, wouldn't abandon him when things got hard. She'd made her choice months ago in a restaurant when a dangerous man had signed to her in her own language, and she'd make it again every day if she had to. Because sometimes love meant standing in the chaos and choosing to stay. Sometimes it meant accepting the danger, because the alternative, a life without him, was worse. Sometimes it meant being willing to fall as long as you were falling together. Lily stood, looked out at the city lights spread below her, and waited for Dante to come home. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. That was enough. That had to be enough. The door opened behind her, and she turned to see Dante silhouetted in the doorway. He looked exhausted, defeated, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. She went to him, wrapped her arms around him, held him while his own arms came around her in a grip that felt almost desperate. We'll figure this out, she signed when they finally pulled apart. Whatever it takes. Dante smiled, tired but real. How did I get so lucky to find you? You didn't find me, Lily signed. You saw me. There's a difference. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Lily let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd make it through this. They'd survived everything else. What was one more impossible obstacle? Together, they walked into the apartment, closed the door on the world outside, and held each other through a night that felt like standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. But they stood there together, and that made all the difference.